It is 1 p.m. Pacific Time, 2 p.m. Mountain Time, 3 p.m. Central Time, 4 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 p.m. Western European Time, 10 p.m. Central European Time, 11 p.m. Eastern European Time, midnight further Eastern European Time. I am a Swede Speaks, and we are live on YouTube. And spring has finally arrived to Scandinavia. So, thank you all for being here. Welcome to my midweek live stream, and God bless all of you. We have plenty of things to talk about today, but before we do that, let me just say this. What I do depends on you. Without you, I would not be able to do this. I am trying to create critical mass against the mainstream media's narrative. We don't need a majority to win this battle. We need 10%, 10 stubborn percent. When the Iberian Peninsula was Islamized, most of the people there were not Muslims, but the Muslims were the most stubborn ones. We can see the same thing happening all over the West today. The followers of Islam are the most stubborn ones, and the most stubborn ones win. To beat this, we need equally stubborn, sane, common sense conservatives. This is what I'm trying to achieve. If you want to be a part of this, if you want to help me with this, then you can send a super chat. Just click the little $ under your name and send any amount you would like. You can also support my work through PayPal, Patreon, or by buying some of my merchandise. There are links for all of that in the box under this live stream. Any and all donations are greatly appreciated, and I will read all super chats as long as you keep them clean. No anti-Semitism, no real racism, no cursing, please. And remember, anti-Islam is not racism, and this channel is not about white identity or anything like that. This channel is about promoting Judeo-Christian Western civilization and defending Western civilization against Marxism, political correctness, and Islam. And hey, like and share this live stream too, please. So now we have 10 people watching in the chat. That's great. Thank you all for being here. I appreciate your presence a lot. So I think it's time to look at our first story for this stream. On April 13th this year, the Swedish government called Facebook, Google, and Twitter to a meeting to discuss illegal and harmful content online and what to do to get rid of that content. Interestingly enough, Facebook did not wish to participate in the meeting, but Google did. Among the people participating in this meeting was the Swedish Justice Minister, the Social Democrat Morgan Johansson, and the Swedish Digitalization Minister, Green Party politician Peter Eriksson. Other people participating were Thomas Mattsson, editor-in-chief of the mainstream media outlet Expressen, and Patrik Oksanen, editorial writer at the local news outlet Hela Hälsingland. Oksanen was one of the people who were able to silence my favorite moderate member of the Swedish parliament, Hanif Bali, on Twitter and Facebook. The Swedish government called the social media platforms to this meeting to discuss how to combat these things, illegal and harmful content. And it was also said that if Google, Twitter, and Facebook did not want to discuss this with the Swedish government, legislation might follow. Does this sound like freedom of speech, like a Western country? To me, this sounds like censorship. And Google complied. The alternative media outlet Samhällsnytt, which is closely affiliated to, but not owned by the Sweden Democrats, lost their ad income from Google. Their account on Google AdSense, which is where you get your ad money from, has been permanently closed down as a result of this meeting. Again, does it sound like Sweden is a free country? Model nation for the world? The Swedish model? Anyone? Sadly, I'm not surprised. Sweden never had freedom of speech, even though Sweden was one of the first countries to formally adopt laws on freedom of the press. But censorship and self-censorship has been the rule at least since the 19th century. When Aftonbladet, a Swedish newspaper, now a part of the mainstream media, but that was not always the case, when Aftonbladet wrote things that those in power did not like during the 19th century, the newspaper was stopped by the authorities. Of course, Aftonbladet solved it by starting the second Aftonbladet, the third Aftonbladet, etc., until those in power gave up and let Aftonbladet write whatever they wanted. And this was in the 19th century. When Torgny Segerstedt Editor of Göteborgs Handels- och Sjöfartstidning in Gothenburg, criticized Nazi Germany, Hitler, and the Swedish compliance with the Third Reich during World War II. He was hated by those in power. He was called up to the Swedish king, Gustav V, who told him to stop writing. Segerstedt kept on writing. And today, the Swedish government tries to stop alternative media and YouTubers by discussions with Google. This makes me sick, but it also means that I will keep on fighting. And I thank God that I don't live in Sweden. I left the country back in 2006. But this makes it easier for me to be a Swede Speaks, a voice for what's going on in Sweden. Of course, I don't trust Norway either. So that was our first story. We might get to return to it in the chat and the live stream. And we now have 14 people watching. And that's wonderful. So hello to all of you. Yeah, Keatington here. Well, hello to you. And hello to We of the People, to Paula P., to Stephen Cray, to David Norton, to La Resistance. Let's see, he says something. Hi, Mr. Swede. Are you going to cover the guy charged in the UK for this pug video, freedom of speech now being legally suppressed? I assume you're talking about Count Dankula. Well, I should talk about him. You're right about that. There are also some cases in Sweden going on that I should talk about. So I might get back to that. Absolutely. So, as I said, we now have 14 people in here, I think. So thank you all for being here. I appreciate your presence here a lot. And if you want to support my work, feel free to send a super chat or donate through PayPal or Patreon or to buy some of my merchandise. As I said, I will read out your super chats in the live stream as long as you keep them clean. No anti-Semitism, no real racism, and no cursing, please. Also, anti-Islam is not racism. Let's look at our next story. Yesterday, there was another truck attack, this time in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. A driver, now identified as Alec Minassian, plowed into a crowd in Toronto, killing 10 and wounding 15. Minassian then asked the police to shoot him. He said he had a gun and he asked the police to shoot him in the head. Most likely, this has nothing to do with Islam. Minassian is an Armenian name, and Armenians are usually Christians, at least cultural Christians. So in this case, I don't think it's Islam. I rather think that Minassian is mentally disturbed in some way. In any case, this trend of truck attacks is really sad, and it has to stop. Now I would like to talk about Pakistan. I need some coffee first. Well, so let's talk about Pakistan and the situation for non-Muslims there. There has been a lot of persecution of Christians and other non-Muslims in Pakistan for years. Why is this important? Apart from the fact that these people are human beings like you and me, Pakistan is also a warning. Pakistan tells us what happens when a country is Islamized. The area now known as Pakistan was not always Islamic. The area was Islamized, and according to a Pakistani Christian that I know, Pakistan was converted by the sword. Men were killed and women were raped, and Islam took over. Of course, most Pakistani Muslims have no idea about this, since this is a part of history that they are not taught. There have been attacks on Christians in Quetta, Pakistan. Forced conversions of young Christian girls are common. 2 days ago, 25-year-old Asma Yaqub died as a result of severe burnings. She was burned because she refused to convert to Islam and marry a Muslim man. This is horrible, and it's expected. This is what happens in Islamic countries. The name Pakistan means the pure country, as in the pure Islamic country. Being a Christian or any kind of non-Muslim in Pakistan means that you will get attacked in horrible ways. We need to pray for Pakistan, for the Christians and the other non-Muslims there, and for Pakistani Muslims to see that Jesus Christ is the truth, the way, and the life. And people need to know what's going on, because it is Pakistan today. But the more the West is Islamized, the more it will come here too. There have been acid attacks in the UK already, as I assume all of you know. And if Islam gets the upper hand, the same kind of things will happen in Sweden, in Germany, in the UK, in Canada. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. Unless Islam is stopped, unless the Islamization of large parts of the West is reversed. Remember, Islam is the problem here. Muslims are people who can change their minds and leave Islam. Many probably would if it was not for the very heavy price of leaving that awful ideology. It has been said that if it had not been for the death penalty in Islam for apostasy, there would not be any Islam left. So we have to fight spiritually, ideologically, philosophically, and politically. We have to fight this monster without becoming monsters. As you may know, I have interviewed an ex-Muslim before, and I will be happy to talk to ex-Muslims again. As you may also have seen, I spoke to a Syrian king, an Iranian-born Christian, when I was in London recently. If you haven't seen these videos already, I recommend you to watch them, but not right now, of course, later, after this stream. There's also been some other news. A new law in California could effectively ban the Bible, since criticism of homosexuality is not okay. However, this will of course not stand in the Supreme Court. Snopes said that the law will not have that effect. I don't trust Snopes on this one. They have been wrong before, since they have a liberal bias. You might say that I have a conservative bias. Sure, I guess I do. Because I think that common sense Western conservatism is the best philosophy, period. And I don't tell you to take everything I say as gospel truth either. Think for yourselves and look into the facts. There was also a survey in Sweden showing that 60% of the people there wants less so-called refugees, and 40% wants a lot less so-called refugees. And here in Oslo, Norway, we are getting Swedish conditions in parts of Oslo too, in some of the neighborhoods in Oslo East, which are the less affluent neighborhoods, the neighborhoods where you have a large presence of non-Western and Islamic immigrants and their descendants. There has been some antisocial behavior in Vestli, in the easternmost part of Oslo. And recently, when the Norwegian organization, the Night Ravens, Natteravnene, were out walking at night, they were attacked. The Night Ravens walk around at night with the idea that the presence of sober adults will make anti-social behavior and crime less prevalent. I believe it works if the criminals and the antisocial individuals consider themselves to be a part of the same society as the Night Ravens. But it will not work if they consider the Night Ravens to be their outright enemies. The Night Ravens observed open sale of narcotics at a pizza place in that part of Oslo, and then they were attacked by youngsters throwing stones at them. They had to run away. Of course, being in Norway, the Night Ravens are unarmed and they are supposed to solve situations without the use of force. Again, it might work in some contexts. It does not work on Oslo East. Could Rudy Giuliani please be mayor of Oslo? In any case, this behavior is known in Norway as Swedish conditions, but we have it in Oslo too now. To some extent in other cities in Norway too, but especially in Oslo. So these were the stories I prepared for this live stream, and I'll have a look at the chat. We now have 16 people watching, and that's great. So thank you for being here, and I'll read some of the comments. Paula P says, so you get killed if you try to leave Islam, and you get killed if you don't join. There are not much choice there then, is there? SMH, I'm not sure what SMH stands for, but, well, it's a good point. Bill B says, hello everyone. Well, hello to you too. And Right Pro HD says, Vestli, Stovner, Romsås, Furuset is a mess. Yes, I agree. These are all areas in the east of Oslo with a lot of trouble. I guess you might know a thing or two about that part of Oslo then. I know more about that part of Oslo than I wish I did. Or, well, I don't think ignorance is bliss. I sometimes say stuff like I wish I didn't know this, but I mean, ignorance is not bliss. So the thing is, once you've been red-pilled, you just can't unred-pill yourself. So it's kind of, you just have to fight a good fight. And I'm drinking out of my Trump mug today too. Lori P says, hello everyone, and Swede too. Oh, hello to you too. Nice to see you today again. That's wonderful. So we're getting spring in Oslo now. Temperature has been rising. All of that's wonderful. Just wanted to say that. So, you know, I care about other things too. Although a lot of what I'm trying to do is either, well, I know I'm trying to create a critical mass. I do it through these videos. I do it through the articles I'm writing. I'm writing on a book, in case you didn't know. I think you may know that. Hopefully, the book will be done before the election in Sweden on September 9th. I don't know. I've been writing on it for about half a year, I think. And I'm sort of halfway through it now. The book's called Understanding Sweden. So hopefully that will be a big success. Who knows? Hopefully some people will be interested. I'm writing it in English because I'm writing for an international market. And actually, one of the points I'm making in that book, and I'll make it to you too, if you want to change the Swedish mindset or the Swedish debate or something like that, Sweden supposedly don't have nationalism, but that's not really true. Sweden have a very strange kind of nationalism. And what Swedes worry about is what people say about Sweden abroad. That's one of the reasons why the concept of the Swedish diaspora or Swedes living abroad have for decades not been very well liked in Sweden, because a lot of these people were people who fled high taxation, and they would move to the UK or to Spain or to Australia or to the US. And they, of course, the left consider these people bad people who didn't want to participate in the building of the Swedish utopia or something like that. Anyway, I'll try to make this point a little shorter. Back in the 90s, Sweden had a prime minister named Göran Persson, and he stated that he was going to, burn, not burn literally, but he was going to burn mark the people who were saying bad things about Sweden abroad. He of course meant Swede, who said bad things about Sweden when they were in other countries. And if we remember, sorry, my throat. Last year in February, I think, I've got the date, the exact date in the preface to my book. But anyway, when Trump made his "look at what's happening in Sweden" remarks, and Swedish politicians, the Swedish mainstream media, they were all in uproar, and they said, well, nothing's happening in Sweden. We don't know what he's talking about. The ex-prime minister of Sweden, Carl Bildt, supposedly a conservative, well, I call him a pseudo-conservative, but anyway, he tweeted, what has he been smoking? Because they all took Trump's statement very literal, but they were all very hurt by it, because he said something about Sweden that they didn't like. If you want Swedes to listen, you have to do it from abroad. Interestingly enough, though, right after Trump's remarks, you had the Rinkeby riots in the outskirts of Stockholm, with cars burning, youngsters throwing rocks at police, and so on. Well, I had almost said the usual story, but that happened just a few days later, and that sort of silenced the criticism. And the Swedish Prime Minister went to DC a while back, and he said at the joint press conference with him and President Trump that we have our problems in Sweden, but we don't have no-go zones, which was an outright lie. Because Swedes in general are very scared of losing face to abroad, and that's the strange kind of Swedish nationalism. One of the chapters in my book is about the strange kind of Swedish nationalism, by the way. I also dig a lot into Swedish history, because I think the Swedish mentality can be explained if you look at history. And on that note, Charles Keatington says, Swedes are not used to thinking, they are used to obeying. Yeah, and that's a part of the Swedish history. I would say, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the real starting point to this is when Gustav I, or as he is colloquially known, Gustav Vasa, took power in Sweden, and he created the Swedish well, the modern state of Sweden, the Swedish centralized state, where he imposed the Reformation on Sweden. He didn't do it because he cared about theology. He couldn't care less about theology, but he wanted to control the church. Because when Sweden was Catholic, the Roman Catholic Church was competed with the king over power of the Swedes. But Gustav I, he stopped that, and he decided that Swedish priests, well, they should give out the royal decrees in churches, and that's somewhere around there is where this brainwash of the Swedes start. And even the Swedish miracle. I read an article yesterday by a Swedish historian who lives in Florida, and he made the point that in industrialized society, the Swedish mentality of obeying, of doing what you're told, it worked very well in an industrial society, and that's what made Sweden rich. However, when we are moving into a post-industrial society, into a service society, where innovation is what's needed, it doesn't work at all. So, unless the Swedish mindset changes really fast, unless the opinion corridor is crushed, it won't only make the Swedes miserable and sad, it's going to make them poor too. I mean, that's at least what I think. Lori P says, it's raining here in Ohio, but I am happy. My tulips are finally coming up. Oh, that sounds wonderful. And Larissa Stans says, Swedes abroad have carried with them seeds of extreme liberalism. This is, of course, a generalization, and there are many, many exceptions. Well, Larissa Stans, there is a lot to that too. I was previously a member of a Facebook group for Swedes living abroad, but I had to leave that group because most of the people there, they were considered right-wing, considered with Swedes living in Sweden. But when I debated them, they were all a bunch of crazy liberals, just not as left liberal as Swedes in Sweden. Let's see here. Lori P says, sounds like Swedes care far more about external things than what is on the inside. They need to find their voice and strength from within and not care what the rest of the world says about them. Well, well, I would agree. Charles Kittington says Swedes in general care only about obeying their masters because otherwise they will get fired and become homeless. Yeah, that's the sad part about, well, what I call the Swedish conformism. Because generally 80% of the Swedes will march together, and they will officially hold the same position. If you have some wrong thing going on, you shut up about it, because if you don't, you're in trouble. And there are some recent examples of this. Yesterday I learned that Jan Sjunnesson, who is another person that I have interviewed on this channel, and hopefully I'll get to do it again. He is an educator. He used to have very, very good jobs in that sector, but then he was red-pilled, and he is now an ex-Marxist. He is somewhat of a conservative, and he's in a lot of trouble. And he's been losing jobs left and right. He's been able to get new jobs sometimes, but it's been a struggle. But what happened a few days ago was that he received a letter from the police, I think, saying that he is now under investigation for hate speech. He, of course, have no idea what he said. He might have said something about Islam. He might have said something about political correctness. As far as I know, Jan Sjunnesson, he has not said anything that could be remotely described as racist, although, of course, if you criticize Islam, you will be branded a racist, which is stupid, but that's the way it is in Sweden and in many other Western countries, including Norway, Canada, the UK, and so on. But so he is now under investigation for hate speech. And people tell him not to show up at the police station because apparently they say you can do that as long as they're not actually coming for you to bring you to the police station. You're not obliged to go there. So, well, I think he should just not go there. I don't know what his plan is, but we'll see what happens with that one. So so we have 22 people in here now. That's great. So thank you all for being here, and we've been here for 25 minutes. Oh, let's see. I'm getting a comment here. Paulo Forever 2 says, what do you think about Avicii's death? He complained about his meaningless life. He didn't care to travel to the Islamic dictatorship of Oman. Is he the typical product of atheism? I guess yeah, in one way, I guess you could say that. I guess if you're not rooted in anything, if you don't have a strong fundament to build on, it's all loose sand. And in that case, all the money in the world is not going to help you. I mean, as far as I know, he was pretty wealthy. He was giving money away, though. That was a good thing. But I mean, I don't know exactly what killed him, but I assume he was killed by a combination of alcohol and drugs. I think so. And a problem with Sweden, or one of the many problems with Sweden, is that when the Social Democrats took control of Swedish society, they also took control of the education system. And well, the teaching of history diminished a lot. And this means a lot of Swedes don't know where they get their fundamental values from, where their identity comes from. And they have created a people who is mentally rootless. And if you want to manipulate people, it's a lot easier to manipulate people who don't know where they come from than people who have a real fundament, a real basis, who have actual roots in some place or in some teaching. Let's see. Charles Keatington says, Swedish politicians don't care very much about how other people view Sweden. One is not allowed to tell the world that the emperor is naked. Exactly. And I think that's the point with the meeting with Google, Twitter, and the Swedish government. Interestingly enough, that Facebook didn't want to go. But I think the point with that meeting was because Facebook and Google, and YouTube is a part of Google, as you know. The point with this is that Swedes are telling the world what's going on. Some of us even do it in English. And the Swedish government does not like that. So they're trying to stop it. Well, for the time being, they can't touch me because I don't live in Sweden. I'm not even a Swedish citizen anymore. But I don't trust the Norwegian government either. It goes something like this. They do something crazy in Sweden. Within a decade or so, Norway follows. Although Sweden does have a more totalitarian mindset than Norway does. Because Norway and Denmark, they have always been closer to the Anglo-Saxon world, to the UK and to the United States than Sweden has. Sweden has historically more turned to Germany and to Russia, which is odd since Russia at the same time was the arch enemy. Although there is a saying, I'm not sure about this, but there is a saying, and it says that in China, people know that the media are lying, but in Sweden, people believe the media. I don't know if Swedes really believe the media anymore. Some do, of course. I guess if your only sources of information is the mainstream media and stuff like that, I guess in that case you will believe, and especially if you live in a nice area, far away from the no-go zones, if you're not in any way affected personally by what's going on, I guess in that case you will actually believe what's said. But then I also think you have a large minority of people who are telling themselves to believe the lies, who might have an annoying feeling that something's wrong, but they don't want to talk about it. They think or they hope that everything's going to go away by itself if we just sweep it all under a rug, if we don't address the problems, if we don't talk about the elephant in the room. Maybe there is no elephant there. Oh, how did I get into that? Anyway. Charles Keatington says, there are many homeless people in Sweden. The numbers of homeless elders are rising because the politicians need their pensions and the houses to certain other people. Yeah, yeah, I read about that too, and it's horrible. So when people think that Sweden is some kind of model nation, I don't know if anyone thinks that anymore. But I do. I think that there are actually some left-leaning people, even in America, who still thinks that Sweden is like this wonderful social democratic utopia or something like that. Well, it's utopia, all right, because utopia means the land that doesn't exist. But no, Sweden has a lot of trouble, and of course there are nice places even in Sweden, but Sweden needs to address these problems. Otherwise, they will get worse. That's just the way it is. And I brought up Pakistan because some of the recent cases, and also because Pakistan was Islamized a long time ago, and or the area that we now call Pakistan. Back then, of course, it was a part of India. All of India was there was an Islamic genocide in India. I don't know if you heard of it, but it was. I don't remember exactly when, but a long time ago. And and if there's been one ruler in India that's been really brutal, it was the Muslims. And I guess that's the reason why you find Sikhs supporting the Football Lads Alliance in these anti-Islamic or anti-terrorist marches in the UK. I think that very much is the case. Lori P says, I remember when I lived in Germany in the 1980s, I would see few elderly homeless. In California, we have mega homeless elderly families, and the immigrants get their houses. I think California, they have the same problem as Sweden. Too many left-wing policies, and well, the easiest way to get people to vote for you, if you're on the left, is to give people free stuff. And let's talk about the welfare state. The theory about the welfare state, or the official idea, what they say is that the welfare state is some benevolent thing. You make sure no one is starving, no one is homeless, and so on. That's like the theory. However, I don't think that's the truth, because the welfare state gives rulers a really good tool to control people. I mean, in one way, you will get a lot of people who will vote for these left-wing parties because they want to keep their free stuff, of course. And also, it makes sure that you stay in line, that you don't dissent, because if you do, you might lose this free stuff. And of course, add to this the Swedish conformism, which makes it all a lot worse. Because if you don't comply, you might lose your job. You might not get a new job because they will Google you. And you might have to apply for unemployment benefits and stuff like that. And then they tell you, you should be happy, you should be grateful. You're getting this free money from us. That could be debated. I mean, up until that point, you actually paid your taxes, so that could be debated. But you get where I'm going with this. Let's see. Paulo Forever 2 says, which country in Western Europe is, according to you, the least Islamized one? I'm not sure, but I would probably go for Iceland. Maybe Estonia. Oh, I mean, okay, Estonia may not be the Western Europe, but okay, I'll go for Iceland, but I don't really know. Iceland and Portugal are probably good candidates, and still Ireland, although I know there's some stuff going on there now. But Iceland and Portugal are probably good examples. Let's see. Valhalla Dome says, you're very right. Many Swedish people deep down really understand that something is fundamentally completely wrong, but they can't take a stand against it for a variety of reasons. Yes, exactly. And I have a big problem with this. Yeah, Valhalla Dome also says, most of these reasons boils down to fear, either from the outside or internally. Yeah, and when most people will not speak up, even the people who kind of know that something's wrong, the price for speaking up becomes a lot heavier. And we get people who can't get a job because they Google you. We get people who will have to stand trial because they said something that was actually completely true, or even if it was wrong. I think you should be allowed to make wrong statements. Uh, I'll say this: I am in favor of free speech. The limits go at incitement to violence. That's the limit. But apart from that, I think everything's fine. And even if your statements are dead wrong, you should still be allowed to make them. Of course, I will keep an eye on the chat though, because my chat is my living room. But that's a different discussion, which I had last time, and I hope I won't need to have that one again today. Let's see. And Paula P says, I feel as though most Americans, like myself, I don't really understand the amount of freedom we have. This is why we're shocked to hear about things like Count Dankula. Yeah, exactly. That's my impression too, from visiting the Midwest twice, and I hope I'll be there soon again. We'll see. Based Female 2.0 says hello from Denmark, or hejsan fra Denmark, but that's hello from Denmark basically. And she also says, I made a video about elderly homeless native Swedes in Stockholm. It's heartbreaking. Yeah, I saw a video. It wasn't on your channel, I'm sorry, but I have seen some videos on that too. The things I talk about is something like a tenth or maybe even 5% of all the things I would like to talk about, because there is I have limitations to the amount of time I have available, but there is so much stuff going on. So, well, I hope you follow others who talk about Sweden and the West and the world in general too. Although I'm happy that you're here right now. And I see numbers are slowly getting up again. That's wonderful. So if you just arrived, please hit the like button and please share this video. And as you know, I'm always happy for a little support. I won't elaborate any further on that right now. But, well, please share this video or this live stream with whoever you think should watch it. And please hit the like button. Do all these good things. I appreciate those things a lot. Let's see. Johan Govels says, or Gavels, I'm not sure. He says, hello, hey. Oh, hello to you too. And he says, what do you think of the new Swedish party AFS, Alternative for Sweden? I would say, I probably agree with them a lot in the way that they are harder on immigration and tougher on Islam, I think, than the Sweden Democrats. But I have a big problem with them. And the really big problem is that their leader, Gustav Kasselstrand, was kicked out of the Sweden Democrats for being pro-Palestine, and I just can't trust people who are pro-Palestine. To me, that's a litmus test. And I know some people will make the statement that, why do you care about Israel? Don't you talk about Sweden? That's correct. That's what I do. However, I'm a Christian. I actually believe in the gospel and in the entire Bible. I mean, we could debate the fine tuning of it, but basically, yes, I believe in the book. And Genesis 12 clearly states that you should bless Abraham and his seed, which I interpret as that you should bless the Jews. And if you don't, you'll be in trouble. And maybe I should go deeper into this some other time. I could make a video on that sometime. That could be interesting. Based Female says, have you seen the base Danish comedian that made fun of Sweden on live TV? Hashtag epic. I've seen some of that, and I think it's very funny. And actually, I think a lot of Swedes laughed at it too, although some didn't. There was some TV debate in Sweden where one of I think she was from the Feminist Initiative, the Swedish Feminist Party. They are, thank God, not in parliament yet. They might get into parliament, who knows, but they're not in parliament now. And she said, yeah, it's funny, but at the same time, I don't like it. I think Johan Gavels, that sounds like a Swedish name. Maybe he saw it. Oh, let's see. Sapotec 1974. Oh, hello to you. Nice to see some of my old timers show up here. He says, looks like Count Dankula won't go to prison. Uh, Sweden had an artist, Dan Park, in 2014 that was sentenced to 6 months in prison for making a painting that someone found racist. Yeah, you're right, Dan Park. I almost forgot about him. And you know what? Maybe it was racist. The thing is, even if it was, you should not go to prison for it. As long as you don't incite to violence, it should not land you in prison. That's my opinion on that. I think you should be allowed to make all sorts of outrageous statements as long as you're not inciting. And there's an interesting turn to my opinion on this. Because if we would decide that we have freedom of speech, but incitement to violence is not okay. Incitement to violence will actually get you into prison, or may give you a heavy fine. That could be discussed. Anyway, well, in that case, we could go into the mosques and we could close down every mosque where they incite against non-Muslims, against Christians, against Jews, against the wrong kind of Muslims. For instance, Sunni Muslims versus Shia Muslims, everyone versus the Ahmadiyas, and so on. So there's an interesting turn to this. But basically, yes, I don't think Don Park should have to go to prison or pay any fines for his paintings. I think many of them may be in poor taste, but that doesn't matter. Uh, let's see. Johan Schöylenstierna, I'm not sure about the pronunciation, my friend, but he says, good evening, Swede. Good evening to you too. And Vladimir Ramirez says, hello, everyone. Swede is number one. Oh, thank you very much. Laurie P says, kind of sounds like the Third Reich, Nazis in Sweden. You get a better job if you agree with them. If you do not, you may not get a good job or a better job. A form of nepotism, you need connections. I think connections have been a big thing in Sweden for a long, long time. And, well, I don't know. I think it might have been that way all the time. Sweden has turned into an oligarchy, more or less. And, the left-wing policies of Sweden, they have not been good for business. So a lot of the major corporations in Sweden today are the same ones as they were 50 years ago. I don't know of any other Western country with this situation. Let's see. Johan Gavels says, will Sweden become like Minnesota on steroids? I thought it already was, although I know that I think that Minnesota, they have certain left-wing policies that might be, how do you put it? Because of a lot of the people there happen to be of Swedish and Norwegian ancestry. They might have brought something with them. La Resistance says, just as a matter of interest, many Muslims in the Middle East are in fact Jews by blood, as in the past they were forced to convert. Are they still Jews? I think what happened was that, as actually Lucian at Freedom Alternative talked about something similar, I think it was yesterday, in a video I started watching, but I haven't had the time to watch all of it. But he was talking about the stubborn minority, or how a stubborn 10% is what you need to win, basically. And he said that in Islam, or in an Islamic country, when a country is Islamized, you had people who converted for, not because they were actually believed in Islam, but for comfortable reasons, because if you converted, you would get lower taxes, better jobs, and so on. And the first generations probably never believed in Islam. Maybe not the second either, but as time goes, they internalize Islam and they turn into actual Muslims. And that's how they win this numbers game. Plus, Muslims tend to have a lot more children than non-Muslims. Let's see. Charles Keatington says, if one does not believe in the freedom to insult and offend other people, one does not believe in freedom of speech. No one has the right not to be insulted or offended. That's correct. I agree completely. Let's see. Right. Oli Dearden says, love Sweden, Swede speaks. Okay, thank you for your kind words. Base Female says, make Sweden Denmark again. I don't know. Sounds like a fun idea. I'm not sure if it would work in practice. Although I have thought that maybe Sweden should just let Danish politicians rule the country for a generation or two. Of course, Denmark still have crazy taxes, but apart from that, Denmark is a lot more sane when it comes to what I call, well, cultural issues. Denmark is more conservative on these issues, but you guys still have crazy taxes. Sweden does too. Sweden and Denmark has sort of been competing over who is which one of the countries will win this competition of having the highest taxes in the world. Johan Gavels, is that how you pronounce it, or is it Govels? Says, seems like Minnesota have a clear connection to Sweden. Vladimir Ramirez says, make Sweden Norway again is better. Well, Sweden has never been Norway, so that's difficult. But Sweden never was actually Denmark, but, well, we had this thing called the Kalmar Union, and that was a Nordic union under one union monarch who was in Copenhagen. So in that way, you could say that Sweden was Denmark, or it was ruled from Denmark, but you also had, well, Sweden was not a Danish colony or something like that. Let's put it that way. Sapotec 1974 says, Sweden should get help from Inger Støjberg, the Danish immigration minister. Yes, absolutely. Actually, I don't know what she's been up to lately, but what I've seen from her is great. And I think it's sad that the Norwegian Justice and Immigration Minister Sylvi Listhaug had to leave. I talked about this before, and I've written on it recently. That article might be up on the Swedish website soon. We'll see. But she, I think the Norwegian left, they shot themselves in the foot here. And now Sylvia is writing a book. I mentioned this 2 days ago, I think, 3 days ago. Anyway, so we haven't heard the last from Sylvie either. She's one of my favorite politicians in the Nordic countries, together with Inger Støjberg. This is all very interesting, actually. Many of the politicians I like happen to be female. Margaret Thatcher, Sylvie Listhaug, Inger Støjberg. I can't think of anyone else right now. Of course, we also have this woman in Finland, Laura Huhtasaari. She's running for the European Parliament now, I think. But these are women who are rational, who will not let emotions trump facts. Something like that. Let's see. Based Female says the Norwegians are way too polite and sweet like the Swedes. They need a dose of balls with Danish rudeness. I used to say that Norwegians are somewhere in between Swedes and Danes. So I guess from a Danish perspective, you would say that, while from a Swedish perspective, you think they are way too rude. But in reality, I think they're somewhere in between. Charles Keatington says, Mrs. Støjberg would be branded a Nazi in Sweden. She probably already is. I think she is by the left, at least. Let's see. Chris says something here. Hi there. Can you speak to the lack of diversity in other Northern European countries like Iceland? Was Sweden like Iceland prior to the onset of immigration in 1975? Thanks. Well, actually, what you could say about Sweden before 1975, Sweden had a wave of, Sweden always had some immigration. I mean, from times immemorial. From immemorial. However, the immigration Sweden had in prehistoric and early historic times was usually people from Finland, people from Germany, people from Scotland, French people, and so on, people who assimilated into Sweden, more or less. Sweden also had some historical minorities like the Sami, the Forest Finns, and so on. Anyway, after World War II, Sweden had a wave of work immigrants, people who would come to Sweden to work, usually from other European countries. I think the most exotic ones were the people from Turkey. But I think the first wave of Turks in Sweden were probably more secular than the situation is now. I could be wrong on this, though. I'm not sure. Uh, However, in the 1970s, and these people were usually employed within a few days after arriving into Sweden, because the Swedish industry really needed people to work. My grandparents were among the people who arrived in Sweden back then from Finland. Uh, but in 1975, they all changed this. So, okay, I'm not sure about Iceland. Uh, I don't know. I don't know in the case. I don't know how many how many immigrants you have in Iceland. I know they have some Polish immigrants in Iceland, and I think that's the largest immigrant population. Uh, and I don't know if Sweden before 1975 would be, how do you put it, similar to Iceland. Sweden's always been closer to the continent than Iceland, and Sweden has been a magnet for some skilled labor for a long time. And Sweden, for instance, Sweden had a Jewish community from the 18th century when Gustav III opened up for Jewish immigration to certain cities in Sweden. And as I said, Sweden did have some homegrown or semi-homegrown minorities before too, but well, there was no one trying to impose Sharia laws, to put it that way. No one burning cars. And I guess in pre-industrial society, it was easier to have, like in parts of Sweden, you had Finnish minorities who lived there for hundreds of years, and they didn't really assimilate, but it didn't cause lots of trouble either. They lived in their place, and that was it. And you had the Sami up in the north. I think that they had some conflicts with the other people living up there for different reasons. I shouldn't go into that now, but as I said, no one. I guess when the Swedish Parliament decided that Sweden was going to become multicultural in 1975, they probably didn't know what they were doing. Let's see. La Resistance says, I could definitely live in Iceland. Maybe, although, I hope to relocate to the Midwest in a not too distant future. Vladimir Ramirez says, the Turklamic state is the biggest threat to Europe. Secular Turkey is dead after Sultan Erdogan came to power. Yeah, that's very sad. And I think Turkey is a good example of how democracy doesn't work in Islamic countries. So when the Turks were given something resembling real democracy, they voted the Islamists into power. Sadly, that's what happened. Lori P says, what made the Swedish immigrants come to the US in the 1800s? Even back then, there must have been something they were not getting in Sweden that they could get in the US. Free land, anything else. Yeah, some Swedes went to the US because the promise of free land. Although most Swedish immigrants ended up living in the cities and doing working class jobs. But there was something else too. There was another pull factor, or a push factor from Sweden and a pull factor from the US. And that factor was that the US had freedom of religion, while Sweden didn't. Sweden had you were allowed to be a Roman Catholic, you were allowed to be a Jew, you were allowed to belong to the Church of Sweden, and that was about it. And the Church of Sweden was the Lutheran Church, or the Evangelical Lutheran Church. You could debate how evangelical they were, but that's their name anyway. And having a prayer meeting in private was illegal. There was a law on that. So many Swedes who left Sweden and went to the US were people who belonged to these free church movements. So, for instance, there is this place called Bishop's Hill. I don't remember if that's in Minnesota or some other state, but that was founded by free church Swedes who came from a place in Sweden called Biskopskulla. They just translated the name to English and called it Bishop's Hill. Let's see. Paulo Forever 2 says, some atheists uh, say that the idea of Christianity make a country weak and like chicken. They give us proof, turn the other cheek. What would you respond to them? I would respond that turn the other cheek is misunderstood. First of all, turn the other cheek is in what you might call on the personal level. And second of all, we have to understand the cultural context of the Middle East 2,000 years ago. And turning the other cheek was demanding to be treated as an equal. As a Norwegian Christian told me today, it would be equivalent to giving the attacker the finger. I mean, sort of. So a lot of Christians have internalized this false understanding of turning the other cheek. But I don't think turning the other cheek means that you should just let yourself be attacked and not defend yourself. Also, if you read through the gospel, you will see that right before Jesus was arrested by the Roman soldiers and taken to be crucified, he told the disciples that buy a sword. If you don't have a sword, buy one. If you can't afford a sword, sell your cloak, I think that's the word, and buy a sword. Which basically means he tells them, if you have to, you need to be able to defend yourselves. And we don't even have to bring Paul into this, but Paul, he wrote some on similar things too. And also, Jesus made a distinction between the spiritual and the worldly. Is that the word? Well, between politics and faith. And in the realm of politics, he tells you to pay to render unto Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and render unto God what belongs to God. And this also means, well, I'll bring in my favorite Swedish bishop. He's a distant cousin of mine, by the way. Well, not that matters, but I think it's fun. Bo Giertz, who was the Lutheran bishop of Gothenburg some decades ago, today, in no way he would be a bishop. No way. They wouldn't appoint him. No way. Anyway, he wrote a book back in the 40s, I think, called The Big Lie and the Big Truth. Den stora sanningen och den stora lögnen. Den stora lögnen och den stora sanningen. The Big Lie and the Big Truth. And he writes about how to be a Christian in society. And one of the things he says is, if your country is attacked and you're a Christian, you don't want to participate in your country's defense because you think killing is wrong. What you are doing then is that instead of defending yourself, defending your family, defending your community, defending your country, you tell your fellow man to go out, defend all of this for you, and maybe die in your place. And that's not a very Christian thing to do. That's his point, at least. I like that point. Laurie P says, Jesus told us to defend ourselves. True. Yes, he did. John Williams says, I'll address this. He says, I know you don't like Breivik, but is there any other way? Well, I certainly hope so. And what I would say is, the longer we wait, the worse things will get, and the worse the reaction will get. And that's why I want us to turn the tide now, today, not tomorrow, and tomorrow, not the day after tomorrow, because the longer we wait, the worse it will get. And I actually fear the reaction too. That's why I'm trying to be a part of turning this tide now. And I hope Sweden will turn around. I sincerely doubt it. I hope I'm wrong. I hope Sweden will turn around. But if Sweden does not turn around, at least Sweden will be a warning example to the rest of the West and even to the rest of the world. Because, as I also like to point out sometimes, I am opposed to Islam everywhere at any time. I'm against Islam in Western countries like Sweden, Norway, Canada, the United States, Spain, you name it. I'm opposed to Islam in Eastern countries like China, Japan, Taiwan, India. I'm opposed to Islam in African countries like Kenya, Nigeria, Lesotho, Botswana. I'm against Islam everywhere and at any time. And there might be someone in here who gets this joke. But this narrative about how being anti-Islam is comparable to being a racist. Well, Islam is not a race, Islam is not a skin color, Islam is not an ethnicity. But okay, let's say it is. After the attack on the shopping center in Nairobi, Kenya, some years ago, there were some Somali Muslims who attacked that shopping center, and they killed people who were non-Muslims. One of the attackers was a Norwegian citizen of Somali background. After that, Kenya sent some troops into Somalia to fight Al-Shabaab. And as I told a very good friend of mine when I heard of this story, I said, so I guess the Kenyans are racist now. I mean, this really shows the absurdity of it. Or look at Nigeria. In Nigeria, you have Muslims attacking Christians. You have Boko Haram abducting Christian girls and forcing them to convert, or they kill them. In Thailand, you have their homegrown Muslims attacking the non-Muslims. You see this all over the place. People who are basically of the same ethnicity, the same color, but is split over the lines of Islam or not Islam. So I mean, no one here would make that stupid claim that being anti-Islam is being racist. But if you want to make that claim, then please explain to me Nigeria. Please explain to me Thailand. Please explain to me the Philippines. Please explain to me Kenya, Somalia. Please explain to me the Sudanese, where, of course, you could claim that the Muslims in Sudan are Arabs, and I guess they are Arabs mixed up with the natives, while the Christians might not have that much Arab blood in them, and so on. And of course, you could make the point that Islam commits some racism towards non-Muslims. Look at Egypt. In Egypt, you have the natives, the indigenous population, the Copts, who are Christians, and you have the descendants of the invaders, who are so-called Egyptians, Arabs, who are attacking the Copts. Of course, you could make the point that these Arab Egyptians probably have some Coptic ancestry too, because they might have abducted some Coptic women and forcefully married them or raped them, and that might have happened. But the point is, you have an Islamic group that established themselves as kind of the ruling population, and they are, fighting the indigenous population. Anyway, I'm sort of got off on some on some rant here, but Let's see. Vladimir Ramirez says, "Tell those atheists to look at the France atheist revolution versus the American Christian revolution and their outcomes." Well, I think 1789 was really the year when I think Marxism, political correctness, all this crazy stuff, it really starts with the French Revolution of 1789. So we've been here for about an hour now, and there are 24 people watching, roughly. So what's going on in your respective countries? Is there something I should address? Charles Keatington says, "It was an early modern Schwexit. Nowadays, Church of Sweden is a neo-Marxist organization." Yeah, I would argue that they are. It's the long march through the institutions. Uh, and well, the idea behind the long march through the institutions was that instead of revolution, the Marxists would take over in societal institutions, education, political parties, the media, and the church. And that's what happened in Sweden. And it's also happened in many other Western countries to some degree. Even if you look at academia in the United States, you see that similar things happen there. And in Norway, there's lots of stuff like this, of course. And I think the list goes on almost forever. And I think today's political correctness is just a new kind of Marxism, because since they couldn't win the working class, they started with identity politics instead. So, but really, it's about control. I mean, if you read Karl Marx, he has these blurry ideas of a future, of a stateless society in the future, where you have some kind of anarcho-communism. But these ideas are very blurry, and what Marxism actually led to was that it gave a tool to people who want to control other people. And I guess that's that's what I mean. Apart from Islam, Marxism, with its modern version, political correctness, these are the ideas I dislike the most. Let's see. Zapotec 1974 says, did you get to see the new documentary at NRK Aleppo's Fall, the fall of Aleppo? Shows new Syrian army which Norway, USA, Saudi Arabia, etc. support in Syria. Pure Islamist terrorists portrayed in the documentary as heroes. I haven't seen it, but maybe I should. Vladimir Ramirez says, have you heard about the Central African Republic being taken over by Islamists in a coup? No, I haven't heard that, but oh, that's sad. And I think, let's see if the geography is correct here. You know, there is one African country I really like, and that's Botswana. They went from a third world country to a middle income country in one generation. They have a large Christian population, and I think that's really the clue to their success. 70 or so % of their population are actual Christians. They had record growth. They have a stable society, but they have really bad neighbors. So I hope they are guarding their borders really, really well. And I would be happy to go to Botswana as long as they don't have to travel through South Africa or Central African Republic or any place where I might be a danger. But I would be happy to go there to see it for myself. Anyway. A Beautiful Life says, our politics is insane, but greed and money is behind it. Politicians make fortunes on migration as they pawn our future for personal wealth. Let's see. In which country do you live, Beautiful Life? Or is this just a general comment on Western politics? I guess that could be true too. Zapotec 1974 says, yes, you should see it at NRK Web TV. It was out a couple of days ago. Okay, I might try. I'll try to do that after this live stream. That could be interesting. Charles Keatington says, political correctness is fascism pretending to be manners. I guess it should be to have manners. George Carlin, yeah, there's a lot to that. Let's see. A Beautiful Life says, Sweden, Jan Emanuel of the Social Democrats is one fine example. Yes, Jan Emanuel Johansson, I think it is. He made a lot of money that way. I heard of that. Laurie P says, I read the other day about a 12-year-old girl that was beaten up in Manchester, England, and the police would do nothing about it. Apparently they have feral gangs of Muslims, deport them. Yes, I know they have a grooming gang situation going on in the UK. Mostly Pakistani Muslims. I guess it could be Muslims from other backgrounds too, of course. I haven't heard about that story though, but I know there's a lot of bad stuff going on in the UK, sadly. There still are some nice areas in the UK too. Chelsea was really nice, I'll tell you that. I hope I'll be able to go back there at some point. I hope they'll let me in again. And that's a half joke, but only a half joke. As long as I'm flying under the radar, I can still get into the UK, but who knows for how long I will be able to do that. Brendan Quinn says, here in New Zealand, it's Anzac Day, the day we remember our fallen fighting wars in foreign lands, uh, for reasons lost in the sands of time, lest we forget. Well, I think some wars are legitimate. I think New Zealanders were a part of the Commonwealth or the British Empire when they fought the Third Reich. And well, thank you very much for doing that. I wish Sweden would have done the same, but I think the British Empire, they had people from the UK, obviously, from Canada, from Australia, from New Zealand, and from many other, well, nations belonging to the British Empire who participated in fighting and actually defeating National Socialism, and that's great. Let's see. Vladimir Ramirez says the Christian population has already started creating a militia called the Anti-Balaka, but the Islamist ruling Seleka terrorists are being helped by the neighboring Islamic. Oh, you mean in Central African Republic? Yeah, that's a story I need to look into. Maybe it will show up in Religion of Peace, a website I use frequently. Charles Keatington says, Sweden has no war heroes from the 20th century. Sweden did not have the spine to fight Nazism. Basically, yes, apart from a few individual Swedes who went to Finland to fight the Soviet invasion. I'd say these people were heroes, but apart from that, I agree. Laurie P says, Chelsea looked lovely on your video. Looked like the historical areas here in my area, old buildings, etc. Yeah, I love old buildings. I don't like modernist architecture. I think modernism is something you do to other people. Johan Fiss says hello to all, or hey all. Well, hello to all. Well, hello to you too. So we now have 21 people watching, and I've been online for 70 minutes. I think I'll stay for a little more, because there's a good discussion going on in the chat, and that's great. And if you have any questions, you can always ask in the chat. And well, I'm very grateful for the people subscribing to this channel, for the people for the people participating in the chat, for the people commenting on my videos, for the people sharing my videos, liking my videos, all that good stuff. And of course, I'm very happy about the people who sometimes send me $1 or $2 or 10 or 100, as I used to say in my videos. So okay, I'll tell you again. So if you want to support my work, you can always send a super chat or donate through PayPal or Patreon. That's all good stuff. And you can also buy some of my merchandise. I might work on creating some more merchandise. And if there's something you would like me to have, well, you can always send me a message. And there are several different ways to contact me, including through Facebook, through Twitter, through email. You can find them all, or you can find my Facebook page, my Twitter page, and my Gab page in the links below this live stream. And you can find you can find my email address if you look on the About section of my YouTube page. So thanks for all the likes, and I see I have 1 dislike. So I guess I don't know if there's a dislike bot going on, or if there is someone who just went here to give me a dislike. But well, at least I created some kind of reaction. But I have a 21-to-1 ratio, so that's great. Charles Keatington says, but they were not sent there by the king. That's correct. They went on their own. Johan Fiss says, it's the same thing about the Swedish church. Yes, we just talked about the Church of Sweden and how it has turned into a neo-Marxist organization dressed up as a church, which I think is really sad, but that's what happened. Hmm. Laurie P says, any more info on the man who ran people over in a van in Toronto? They wouldn't at first name him. It's like they don't want to say he is a Muslim. Well, pretty well, they do. They say his name is Alek Menassian, which is an Armenian surname. So if that's correct, he most likely isn't a Muslim. Uh, right now, I think it's probably some disturbed person. Although I could be wrong. I wasn't there, and I don't know. Vladimir Ramirez says, I was unsubbed from your channel once for no reason. Also, how big is the atheist community in Sweden? Yeah, I think YouTube is kind of working against me. So make sure that you're subscribing, because sometimes YouTube kicks people off channels if you haven't watched them for a so long time and stuff like that. Uh, I don't really know. Sweden is supposedly uh, the most atheist country in the world, or maybe second to Estonia. I've seen different numbers on this. Uh, However, or it depends on what you mean by atheist community. You have an organization, the Swedish Humanist Association or something like that. Oh, Charles Kittingham says the atheist community in Sweden equals the Church of Sweden. Yeah, that's funny, but not too funny, because there is some truth to that too. Laurie P says Syrians are also Christian. Well, you have the Assyrians or the Syriacs. They are Christians. Modern day Syrians are usually Muslim, but you could debate whether they should actually be called Syrians or not. I get what you're hinting to. And you know, there's a large Assyrian community in Sweden. Most of them live in one town, about how far is that? 40 kilometers? What is that? 25 miles or something like that from Stockholm, Södertälje. And you have a lot of Assyrians living there, and they are Christian, at least culturally Christian, but they are pretty strong in their identity as Christians. And they don't like Islam, by the way. I have yet to meet a Middle Eastern Christian who likes Islam, by the way. Johan Fiss says Swedish church allowed for Imam Muslim to use church for mosque. Yeah, I know. They do all sorts of crazy stuff. And I think that's really sad. I don't understand how that's allowed, even. I mean, how do they get away with that? There should be something in the confessional scripture of the Church of Sweden that stops that, but I don't know. They do that kind of crazy stuff. Vladimir Ramirez says, I mean, in the belief of God, and I only ask because atheism is a symptom of a dying civilization. Yes, I agree. And I think atheism in the West paves the door for Islam. I mean, a lot of atheists think this sounds crazy, but I don't think an atheist in general will stand up for his or her disbelief against the threat of actually being killed for not embracing Islam, while a Christian will, because I'd rather go to heaven than to live for a few more years and then go to hell, to put it that way. Valhalla Dome says, I see that Samhällsnytt is being demonetized by Google on the force from the treacherous canal in Stockholm. Yes, they've been demonetized, and that seems to be a result of the meeting between the Swedish government and Google. So, in the US, Facebook or Mark Zuckerberg had to go to a congressional hearing where he was grilled on freedom of speech. In Sweden, the government calls on Google and Facebook and Twitter, but Facebook didn't go, by the way. But they call on them to come to a meeting to tell them to stop freedom of speech, to make sure people don't, well, to put it that, to be blunt, to make sure that people don't commit any wrong think or wrong speech online. So, well, that should tell you all you need to know, really. So, I've been online for 80 minutes now, uh, and it's about time to wrap this up for me. But if you have any closing statements, questions, or whatever, give it to us now, and I'll wait for 30 seconds or something. Uh, Charles Keatington says the leftist has never endorsed freedom of speech. That's correct. Laurie P says more people in the USA do not believe in God. They have fallen away from the Christian faith. They will embrace anything else, but not having a relationship with God. How sad. I think my impression is that in certain parts of the US, like California, the West Coast, parts of the East Coast, and I guess also in larger cities and on college campuses, you will see this. If you go to smaller towns or rural America, you might get another picture. Right. Charles Keatington says Facebook did not attend the meeting probably because that would have made their documents public documents. Right. They were trying to protect themselves. So, yeah, that's interesting. So, thank you all for hanging out with me today, this afternoon or this evening or this morning, depending on, well, if you're in the Americas, in Europe, in New Zealand, or wherever you are. And thank you for participating, for your support. And until next time, have a nice day and God bless.